Hey, hope everyone's having a great week. We're off to a good start in our class, and I just wanted to say a couple of things about some of the things that we've been speaking about. Specifically this week, we're in a little bit of a challenging module. Again, the Hebrew itself is a challenge, so keep working on that. And again, remember, as far as the Hebrew goes, continue to learn some new things each day, and you're going to be okay. Again, work hard at the Hebrew, and little by little, you'll get better at it. It's inevitable. Anything that's worth learning is going to take a little bit of effort and some time, so be patient with yourself. And also remember this one quick tip. If you're just staring at the Hebrew, waiting for something miraculous to happen, the miracle's not going to come. Okay? So the key thing you're going to have to do is don't stare at Hebrew if it's not making sense to you. Get 2 or 3 English translations together and compare the Hebrew against them. Parse the Hebrew words and then see how those words are translated in the various English translations, or if you're using a Spanish translation or a German translation, you can do the same thing. But look for the nuance and use the Arnold Choi book and the language categories, the parsing categories, the grammatical categories in there to be able to explain the different nuances. Now, is every nuance going to say, wow, deep? Of course not. But the practice of learning grammatical analysis will allow you to actually make judgments and understand translational possibilities in those cases where it really does make a difference what kind of preposition you're dealing with. Okay, now let's move on to historical criticism really quick. Again, we're working on a little bit on source criticism. You've read the article from David Baker. I know some of you liked it, some of you haven't. Again, I'm not advocating source criticism, and frankly, I don't use it in my own exegetical work. There's a lot of problems with it. However, we need to understand it, because Christianity is a historical faith, and because it makes historical claims, it opens itself up to at least using some of the historical practices and methods that you use to study any kind of historical event. Now, in source criticism's defense, remember, it's a hypothetical, it's a hypothesis that it's a hypothesis that allows scholars to answer questions that a close reading actually raises. So, for example, in Exodus, in this text we're looking at today, how come there's 2 different appearances by God to Moses that have their own distinct vocabulary, different kinds of frameworks? You have a prophetic kind of a calling on Mount Sinai, or actually it's Mount Horeb, isn't it? It's not even Mount Sinai. And then you have a appearance more like in a dream in Exodus 6. So you have these 2 callings. Now, over time, source critics have argued that this is actually the same event, just reported in 2 different ways. Now, you don't have to take that. And in fact, you may disagree with it. And just to, if you agree with it, it's fine. But I actually don't agree with that. I don't see this as evidence for 2 different sources. However, you need to understand why somebody would say that. Again, why does all this research matter? Why are we struggling with this? Because, again, intelligent people, and that will include people that you'll serve someday. Again, this isn't about godless scholars and poor evangelical seminary students. Given the internet, Dr. Google, and given all of the options on cable TV, our lay people are constantly confronted with historical critical claims. You can't put the History Channel on and watch a Bible program without seeing some of this. So what would you do if you're a pastor and you're teaching a Sunday school class, you're teaching on Exodus, and you have a student, again, this isn't a godless person, this is a student who wants to understand the Bible better, who's confused, and they want to know what this JEDP stuff is all about. And they've just watched a program, and maybe they've looked it up on Google and they've read some fairly convincing things. If your only recourse is to make fun of the person and say that these are all godless scholars, we're in trouble, right? So we need to do it for discipleship reasons. Again, another reason we want to do that is for missional reasons. There's lots of intelligent people who aren't coming to faith because of legitimate intellectual reasons that they're not coming to faith. Again, we have lots of kids that have gone through universities, private colleges, have taken Bible classes, and they perhaps had a very liberal professor who was very persuasive, and they've put all kinds of stumbling blocks. We have to at least know enough of the argument so that we can allow a person to fall in love with the Bible again on its own terms. Now, I want to talk about some of the close readings issues that come up for missional reasons. A few years ago, I had planted actually a house church. We had actually a home church, planted it from scratch. It was meeting in the living room of one of my friends who had a fairly decent-sized house. And most of the people that we were able to bring into this community of faith were not Christians. And it was fascinating to see the kind of questions that people bring to the Bible when they don't know that they're not supposed to ask hard questions. Maybe you're like me. When I was a young person, my pastor wasn't able to help me to grow in my faith. I had questions that the pastor couldn't answer. He always just said, don't ask questions, just believe. Thankfully, I did find some very intellectual and wise Christians who were able to actually help me in my questioning. And in fact, I found as I've grown in my faith, we look at the church, some of the great scholars of the church like Anselm, he said, I'm faith-seeking understanding. I believe, and I have questions. So it's bringing questions to the text doesn't mean you don't have faith. It means you have a tremendous amount of faith because you trust that God's going to help you to find those solutions. So we don't want to discourage people from asking questions. But one of the most interesting questions was just reactions that people had to things that you wouldn't have thought about, like Noah's Ark. They wanted to know, this one person liked dogs a lot. They wanted to know why God killed all the innocent animals. Now, they'd missed the good news in Noah's Ark by just looking at it from a modern perspective. So as a pastor, how am I supposed to answer that kind of a question? Or if you read in Exodus in the Passover, God kills the firstborn of everybody in Egypt. That's rather horrific if you think about it. What does that mean for the character of God? We need to think about that and be prepared to talk about that. What does it mean that Pharaoh's heart was hardened or that God hardened Pharaoh's heart? Why does Moses' father-in-law have two different names, Jethro and Ruel? Why is it called Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb? These are the kind of questions that people will come and bring to the text. And we just need to have frameworks to help understand those things. So this week when you're working on the Exodus 3 and 6, have a look at it. Look at these two places where God encounters Moses and ask yourself, what is the role of these two chapters in the final form of the book of Exodus? Are we dealing in fact with two different versions of the same story? If we aren't, then why are they in and if we are, why are they in the final form? If not, what's going on here? And I think asking these kinds of questions will draw you deeper into the Scriptures. And again, don't assume because we ask a hard question, don't assume anything about the person's faith. Because what I found in my life, the persons that can ask the best questions can get the deepest into the Scriptures. In this class, it's a safe place. This is Asbury Theological Seminary. We believe that the Scriptures are without error in all that they affirm. I sign off on that actually, I just signed off on it again a couple of weeks ago. At the beginning of the spring semester, the faculty sign off on that because we believe it. But notice that comment, the Scriptures are without error in all they affirm. The key for us is to figure out what the Scriptures actually affirm, right? And that's going to involve the hard work of interpretation. So don't worry. This is a safe place. If you can ask anything that you want in this class, in fact, you might say, hey, I want to be as skeptical as possible because I want to sort of mouth the words that I can imagine somebody that I'm trying to win to Christ might ask me. And if you can't ask hard questions in this classroom, where are you going to ask the hard questions? Again, let's continue the good dialogue. Let's be respectful of each other. Let's assume the best of each other. And let's have a great time digging into Exodus. I'm having a blast. I love this book. I love the way that it lifts up the Lord and describes God's character, describes God as a profound God of love, a God of history that comes into the world. And I wouldn't want to have it any other way than a God that actually can come into history, take the side not of the powerful, not of the rich, not of the persons who don't really need God, but takes the side of those who are desperate for what only God can do. In this case, it was God's people that were enslaved in Egypt. And that same God moves and sends ultimately Jesus the Messiah to announce God's ultimate victory, not in the Red Sea or in the Exodus, but in the cross and in the resurrection. That's good news, friends. I'll see you in the discussion rooms.